The Aggies are being severely disrespected by Pro Football Focus.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in the Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. PFF, they are severely disrespecting the Aggies. They put out a list where they ranked 130 of the college football teams, right? And so I've seen some other publications then write down where all the SEC teams are ranked and basically rank the SEC from that. And this is how it pans out. Georgia, Bama, LSU, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Texas A&M at 10, Missouri at 11, Ole Miss at 12, and Auburn at 13, Vandy at 14. So quick off the bat, my first knee-jerk reaction is I think having Texas A&M at 10 is crazy, but having Ole Miss at 12 and Auburn at 13 is also crazy. Those are two teams that I'm a little bit, I'm high on to a degree, not as high as I am on Texas A&M, but I'm high on those teams. And I think that right there discredits this whole list. Having Texas A&M at 10, Ole Miss at 12, and Auburn at 13. I mean, the only one that you could argue is somewhat realistic is Auburn at 13. But I mean, here's the deal. I'll take Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Auburn to beat Mississippi State, South Carolina, Florida, and Kentucky this season. I think those three teams are better than the four teams I just listed. But sticking back to the disrespect to the Aggies, I think it's just crazy. I mean, Texas A&M, I get it. I mean, people are down on Texas A&M because of how bad last season was. I get it. It's no crazy take by any means. But what stands out to me is this, and I think this is what I'm starting to learn. Because obviously, all Texas A&M fans know that the Aggies are getting severely disrespected in the national media right now. What I think I've kind of learned is this. I think people were so fed up with Texas A&M being ranked so highly for so long in a preseason that they've decided, to just go from, heck, we've been too high on them. Now we're going to be too low on them. And that's what this list feels like to me. I mean, I get it. You can argue, and everybody knows how bad last season was for Texas A&M. Nobody's going to disagree with that. But what I will say is this. That doesn't mean that they're now the 10th best team in the SEC. Top to bottom, the Aggies are better than Mississippi State, South Carolina, Florida, Kentucky, and I even think potentially Arkansas when it's all said and done. I know you drop a game to South Carolina last season, but at the end of the day, my argument is this. We've talked about the young talent. We've talked about injuries last season. I don't want to make excuses for last season, but having young talent, it's hard for that to immediately click. There were players went down last year. You lose Smith, you lose Bryce Foster. You have the quarterbacks in and out all season long. The Aggies were not set up for success last season. The offense was bad, but it's because, it seemed like you had new players playing every week because of injuries and because of just different things. And so at the end of the day, I get people being down on Texas A&M. I'm not saying people should that if you aren't high on Texas A&M, I get it. But I think you can be down on Texas A&M without being crazy and saying they're the 10th best team in the SEC. I mean, they have a top 10 defense in the country. You have a second-year quarterback who is a 5-star. You have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, an offensive line full of blue-chip talent that's set to take a giant step forward this season. It's all there to click. And I've talked about it. If it all clicks, I think this team can win 9-10 games. If it, some of it clicks, I think this team could win 8 games, 7, 8, 9 games. And if it all doesn't click, you can have a painful floor like last season, 6-5, whatever wins like that. But so we've talked ceiling and floor a lot in talking about this team. But what I'm kind of getting at here is this. I don't see how you can argue that this team isn't more talented than those rosters. Kentucky. So we'll talk about Kentucky, right? Kentucky, and I root for Kentucky. I have family in Kentucky. I have family that my mom's a Kentucky alum. My Grandpa's a diehard Kentucky fan, so like I root for not really Kentucky basketball because those fans are crazy, but I root for Kentucky football. They're the underdogs. You know what I mean? It's I don't root against them, and Texas A&M so rarely plays them. It's like they don't bother us. So my point there is like this is no Kentucky hate. They're not better than Texas A&M. They are not. They have a solid defense. They're bringing a good quarterback in Devin Leary, but at the end of the day, I think really the only position you could argue that Kentucky's better at than Texas A&M is quarterback. Now, I get that that's the biggest position on the field, but it's not, it's not the end all be all. If you're more talented everywhere else, your quarterback is going to be able to just kind of guide you to victories. I think if Kentucky and Texas A&M played, I think the Aggies win that one. I don't know if I'd go as far to say handsomely, but I think they win it by a touchdown, 10 points. So I think this is the case of people have lost interest in the hype train surrounding Texas A&M. I'm staying on the hype train, and people, and I've seen these comments all the time. Your only argument is talent. All you have is the talent in Petrino. Those are your only arguments for why Texas A&M is going to be good. Yeah, having blue chip talent all around on the field and a historic offensive coordinator is a reason to be high on a football team. I've been getting that pushback, but at the end of the day, like, yes, I am high on the talent because it's 4- and 5-star players all around the field, young talent. And then, like I say, also then the offensive coordinator, Coach Petrino, I've talked about how high I am on that. That's my argument. I've seen those comments, and I get what you're saying that I don't have like 40 arguments placed about why Texas A&M is going to have a good year, but I think it's simple as that. You have more talent than the other team. You know what? And we've talked about the blue chip ratio. You have more talent than the other team unless you're playing. I'm pretty sure it was Bama, Georgia, like Ohio State and Clemson. I think those are the 4 teams ahead of Texas A&M. So unless you're playing those 4 teams, which you do play Bama, you have more talent than the other teams on the field. And that's just a fact based on blue chip ratio. It's a fact based on blue chip ratio, even after losing a handful of guys in some recent classes. So that is my argument surrounding this team, and my argument as to why you have to have them higher than these players. And like I say, I think Mississippi State, South Carolina, Kentucky, I can get it. If you're someone that is a big believer in older quarterbacks, that's fair. It's fair to have those teams ranked above Texas A&M simply because they have great quarterbacks, Rattler, Rogers, and Leary. I can see that argument, but at the end of the day, I think that Texas A&M beats all 3 of those teams. I think they beat Mississippi State, South Carolina. They'll have a chance to do so there because they play those 2 teams. They're not going to play Kentucky. But once again, I think Texas A&M would beat all those teams. I think they would beat Florida. I think they're going to beat Arkansas. If I think this was a correct list, the Aggies would be either 5th in front of Arkansas or 6th behind Arkansas. And then, Ole Miss, I believe, should be tossed up there somewhere too. I like Ole Miss, but I've talked about I think there's just a lot of stuff going on over there with all these transfers, and I just don't. I've talked about I don't like the way Coach Kiffin does with transfer portal stuff, so I'm not very high on that team. But they would be in the mix as well. But like I say, 5, 6, 7, that's the range the Aggies should be. 10, no, that's not right. And like I say, I think this list loses all credibility when you have A&M at 10 and Ole Miss at 12. That's just not correct. Ole Miss is a team that's a lot of people think are in for a good season. Texas A&M is a team that, many surrounding the program think, maybe not in the national media, but think is in for a good season. So, but I think the takeaway for this for me is hopefully this can be a motivator for the team. Hopefully the team can step back and say, listen, people are down on us. Let's go prove them wrong. I kind of talked about that yesterday with the running back room, who people are down on the running back room. So we talked about that yesterday, but and I made that same argument. These guys, Daniels, Moss, and Owens, hopefully they're going to be motivated every day to say prove people wrong. I think that could be the same argument made here for this list because Texas A&M is better than the 10th team in the SEC, and I think they have a lot to prove, and I think they are going to prove it on the field this season when they put together a big year with a lot of wins. The Aggies have a massive offensive line. Let's compare it to some of their competitors in the SEC West. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. We've talked about some sports being over. Baseball, as we just said, we're full swing into baseball season. You can start placing future bets on college football, NFL football. Who's going to win the MVP this year? Is it going to be Josh Allen? I think it's going to be Josh Allen. That's my preseason MVP vote. So if you agree with me, disagree with me, if you think it's going to be Mahomes or you think it's going to be CMC, go put your money where your mouth is. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. So this offensive line is massive. I ran the numbers on it. I've talked a lot about how I am high on the offensive line as a whole, and I think they are going to improve this year. It's blue chip players, blue chip talent, and I think that is going to lead to an improved. I think Steve Adazio is going to have the fellas in line this year. I think this offensive line is going to take a step forward, assuming Foster and friends can stay healthy. But this offensive line is massive. Okay. I took down the heights and weights of Texas A&M's offensive line, added those together, and then did the same for 3 opposing teams that the Aggies are going to face this season in Bama, Arkansas, and Auburn. So let's look at this offensive line, height and weight, and see where it compares to where it compares to these 3 teams and why I think this is a good thing for Texas A&M. So Trey Zune, 6'7", 320. Cam Dewberry, 6'4", 330. Bryce Foster, 6'5", 325. Layden Robinson, 6'4", 325. And Ruben Fothry, 6'8", 330. That brings the Aggies' weight total to 1,630 pounds and the height total to 388 inches of total height. So that's how big the Aggie offensive line is. Now let's compare it to some other teams. Bama has Texas A&M by a few pounds, and they're a bit inflated by a massive tackle. Okay, so left tackle at Bama, 6'7", 354. Holy moly, that's a big left tackle. But so 6'7", 354. Left guard, 6'3", 310. Center, 6'4", 301. Right guard, 6'5", 335. Right tackle, 6'6", 335, bringing Alabama's total weight to 1,635 pounds and the height to 385 inches. So the Aggies have Bama by 3 inches of height, but Bama has the Aggies by 5 pounds of weight. So then you look at Arkansas, another massive tackle for Arkansas, left tackle for Arkansas, but it's height-wise, not weight-wise. Arkansas, their starting left tackle, 6'9", 310. Starting left guard, 6'5", 310. Starting center, 6'5", 306. Starting right guard, 6'6", 341. Starting right tackle, 6'5", 303. So altogether, this is a tall but skinny offensive line. So Arkansas, 1,570 pounds, meaning the Aggies have them beat by 60 pounds. That's, don't make me do math, but, a good amount of pounds per offensive lineman. Then 390 inches in height. So the Razorbacks do have the Aggies by 2 inches of height. Auburn is the last team we have here. The Auburn Tigers offensive linemen weigh 1,566 pounds. So the Aggies have them by a handsome amount, about 64 pounds. And they are also 6 inches taller, as Auburn's offensive line is 382 inches tall. So, the takeaway from me is this. I think there's an ideal weight to an offensive lineman. I think 315 to 330 is your kind of – I love that range for an offensive lineman. I think it's a perfect place to sit. Just because you're not too skinny to like some of these Arkansas linemen, 310, 306, 303. I'm not saying they're going to get pushed around because they're still strong individuals. That's a lot of weight. But at the end of the day, that is smaller than some of these other teams. So, but where Texas A&M linemen sit, I like this number. Zune, 320. Dewberry, 330. Foster, 325. Robinson, 325. Fothry, 330. So I think the takeaway for me is this. Your offensive line is they're not too skinny, they're not too big, they're perfect athletic sizes to dominate an SEC defensive line, and SEC linebackers. And that's the takeaway for me. I think that's a big deal. I think that's a positive for this Texas A&M offensive line. Like I said, they're not too big to where they're going to be gassed on a play-to-play basis. They're not too small to where a big old nose guard is going to push you on the ground just like that, And I love a lot of times if sometimes you'll see smaller centers. Bryce Foster is not a small center, 6'5", 325. That is a perfect size for a center. So I do like seeing that. But I think, it's good to see. So I care more about weight than I do height for offensive line. That's just my opinion. Some might disagree. I think that's kind of to each their own. But for me, I think you want to be in a good weight range. You want to weigh a lot, but not too much. You want to be right in the range I talked about. And every single Aggie offensive lineman is in that range I talked about. So they are, like I said, 64 pounds heavier than Auburn's offensive line, 60 pounds heavier than Arkansas's, and only 5 behind Alabama's. So 3 good football teams that recruit well and recruit big, strong offensive linemen. And the Aggies are hanging with Bama. They're a couple pounds behind them and killing Arkansas and Auburn. So I think that's a positive for me. I think it proves that this offensive line is big and they are athletic, skilled, and that I think they're going to take that step forward this season that I've talked about. And I think it's going to happen. And I think proving how big and strong and athletic they are hopefully gets you all to see where I'm coming from as to how good this Texas A&M offensive line could be in 2023. There was a list that came out ranking the top 100 college football players this season. Only one Aggie was represented. We've talked about this list before. We're going to reveal who that Aggie was, and we're also going to reveal, if you made this same list at the end of the season, which Aggies could be on it. Coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. So On3 made a list. We've talked about it before, but they ranked their top 100 college football players. Only one Aggie was represented, and that was Tyreek Chappell. So, to me, I made a list. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is funny. I now just say the Shamars, which is kind of, so I just think that's funny because I wrote down Shamars. But so I have a list of 10 guys here that I think could potentially if you did this same top 100 list and you did it again at the end of the season, how would it be different? Who would be on there? I wrote a handful of guys that I think could be on that list, and I'm going to make the case for a few of them. So I'm going to read my list and then make the case for a handful of them that I really do believe have a shot at this. Evan Stewart, Bryce Foster, Walter Nolen, Conor Wegman, Moose Muhammad, Aniyah Smith, Tony Grimes, Damani Richardson, and then the Shamars. So I got 10 guys. So the first guy I'll say is Evan Stewart. And Evan Stewart was frankly the guy I was really surprised to not see on this list when I read this. Stewart is too talented to not be on this list. And I do think when all is said and done, he would be a guy that's going to do that. But I think part of his problem and part of a guy like Walter Nolen and the Shamars problem is how good those position groups are. And that's why I don't have Reuben Owens or Moss or Daniels here, is because I think the players on this list are going to be guys who get a ton of work, and I think the ball is going to be spread around through the running back room. So I don't think they're going to get as much work as like a Rocket Sanders might or a Jarquez Hunter over at Auburn. Or a Judkins at Ole Miss. Like, I don't think these running backs should get that level of work like what A-Chain did last season. So I think it would be difficult for one of those guys to make this list. I think you could almost say the same for this receiver room. I think Evan Stewart, Smith, and Muhammad, I think they're all that talented that they could hurt each other's accolades because the ball is going to get spread around so much to all these talented players. And Petrino does like to do that, like I said, on the ground, obviously, but through the air as well. He likes to spread the ball around to a handful of receivers. So That's the thing I thought of immediately. I could see all three of the main receivers being candidates for this list. And I do think when it's all said and done, one receiver is going to separate themselves. And I do think it's going to be Evan Stewart. So if I had to pick one of the receivers to hop on this list at the end of the 2023 football season, I would say it would be Evan Stewart. But I do think, like I said, how good this room is as a whole is going to really affect the accolades these wide receivers receive. So that's my thought there. Conor Wegman, I think Conor Wegman's route to making a list like this is so simple because you're the quarterback. If you lead this team to 9-10 wins and you have a monster breakout season, you're going to be on this list. You're going to be like if, let's say, Conor Wegman and Walter Nolen both have breakout massive seasons. And you could say worth their weight in gold, they were about ranked the same, right? A list like this would have Weigman 30 spots higher than it would Walter Nolen, just because Weigman's the quarterback. He's the guy who gets the ball on every offensive snap. He's doing all the important stuff, hitting the receivers, face of the program. So I think Weigman, his path to making a list like this isn't hard to talk yourself into. If he has a good season with outstanding running backs, one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, and an offensive line that's set, thanks to their massive size, to take a step forward, it's easy to make the argument for why Conor Wegman is in for a massive sophomore season. If he does have that big sophomore season, I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, one bit to see him on a list like this. So I truly believe that if what I think is going to happen for this team happens, with how good I think this team could be, if all the things hit that I think might hit, I think Weigman would be the one who reaps all the rewards from that and would be the headline on lists like this. Even though, his receivers helped him. And we all get that. Receivers help and offensive line helps and play calling helps. And it's not, the quarterback can't do it by himself. So, but I do think Weigman has the easiest road to an accomplishment like that. So Damani Richardson and Tony Grimes are also guys that I could see making this list. I think, I don't think this defensive back room is once again one of the best in the country. I've found lists that ranked like the best position groups in the country for a handful of different positions. The Aggies were listed on wide receivers, defensive back room, defensive line room, wide receiver room, and their defense as a whole was listed as like all those groups, and then the defense were listed as top 10 in college football. So, we've talked about the talent, but so Grimes comes in from North Carolina, former 5-star recruit. I think he's in for a big season. He was a bit, I would say, underwhelming during his time at North Carolina, but like I said, the traits were there. The things there for someone to develop into an absolute monster were there in Grimes. And I think he could be a guy who could come into Texas A&M this season, fully finish his game, develop his game to that last resort, and be a guy who gets selected in the NFL draft, maybe in 3rd round, 4th round. So, that's my thoughts on Grimes and Richardson. I mean, it's the same argument. I think this defensive backfield as a whole is strong, full of, once again, I know I keep saying blue chip talent, but it's all a fact. I mean, it's just because of stuff like that. I think it leads to success. And I think 2 defensive backs, they're going to be playing on a snap-to-snap basis, could be guys, if this defense is as good as I and many others project, could be guys that see themselves receiving some accolades like this when it gets to the end of the season. So that's my list there. The Shamars, Damani Richardson, Tony Grimes, Anaya Smith, Muhammad, Conor Wegman, Walter Nolen, Bryce Foster, Evan Stewart, and then, of course, the one person who was on the list, early in Tyreek Chappell. So, I think those guys are all in for big seasons, and I think at the end of the day, they're going to have some serious accolades to their name. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. As always, I appreciate you all tuning in. It truly means the world to me. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.